This story isn't about the law. It's about the heart. I'm Sarah Jenkins, a police detective in Chicago. Over the years, I've seen a lot, but one day, fate presented me with a request that shattered all boundaries. In a cold cell, a young man, with hopeful eyes, said, "Before I die, I have one last wish." Those words changed everything. I didn't know that choosing between duty and feeling would become the hardest test of my life. Evening in Chicago descended slowly. The orange glow of streetlights reflected in the puddles on the narrow streets of the old neighborhood. I was heading home after work, but my thoughts kept circling back to one person. Jake Mosley, arrested on a strange charge that left too many questions unanswered. His gaze, full of a quiet fire, haunted me even outside the office. At home, my grandma, Vera, was waiting for me. She always greeted me with a cup of strong tea and a quiet smile. I saw the wisdom of years lived in her gray hair and wrinkles, but that evening, her words sounded worried. "Sarah, a woman's heart shouldn't become a pawn of the law. Be careful." I smiled, but inside I knew this warning concerned Jake. The apartment was warm, but a cold whirlwind was in my soul. I remembered his cell, gray walls, the heavy smell of dampness, and him tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair falling across his forehead. There was no fear in his voice, only a strange calmness. "I'm not asking for freedom, only asking for one night, like a husband and wife," he said. Those words burned me, not as a woman, but as an officer used to precision and order. The next morning, arriving at the precinct, I received his case file. The papers looked dry. Complaint from a woman named Anna Douglas. The charge: defamation of family honor.
Oh.
No witnesses, no direct evidence, only lines full of resentment and pain. I closed the folder, realizing the truth was buried deeper. My colleague, Marina Olson, noticing my confusion, smirked. "What's up? Another tricky case. They say Mosley is something else. Just watch out, don't get lost in his eyes." It off, but my heart traitorously sped up. An investigation lay ahead, but deep down, I already felt this wouldn't be a simple case. The morning was cold and foggy. The gray Chicago air seemed to push me towards anxiety. Walked into the precinct, straightening my neat jacket and headed straight for the cells. Steel doors, the smell of iron, echoing footsteps, all of it always gave me a sense of power. But that day, it was mixed with a strange tremor. Jake sat on the bench, head down. His simple gray prison uniform looked tight on his broad shoulders. When he looked up, I was pierced by the feeling that he wasn't just looking at a detective, but straight into my soul. "Mosley," I said sternly, "you need to explain what happened." He smiled almost imperceptibly. "Detective Jenkins, I have no words of defense, only a request." He leaned closer to the bars. "Before I die, I want to experience what fate has denied me." I froze. His voice was calm, but in it, I heard a strength that couldn't be ignored. "The law doesn't recognize such wishes," I replied coldly. He just looked at me in a way that took my breath away. There was no lust in that look, only longing. And a strange warmth. I turned sharply and left before my knees betrayed my trembling. Returning to the office, I opened the case file. Anna Douglas's name flashed before my eyes. A middle-aged woman, complaint of defamation of honor. No details. I decided to go see her in person. The courtyard where Anna lived greeted me with dampness. In the hum of children's voices, the wooden gate creaked. The owner herself appeared on the doorstep, dark-haired with eyes full of weariness. "Are you here about Jake?" she asked, avoiding my gaze. "Yes, I need details," I said gently. Anna cried, dropping her hands. He ruined my life. I don't want to say anything. Let him be punished." Her words sounded rehearsed. There was no rage in them, only pain. But pain from what? I left, feeling empty. A little further away lived his old friend, Sam Harrington, the owner of a fabric store. A strong, stocky man greeted me respectfully. "Jake," he sighed heavily. "Detective Jenkins, he's not a criminal. His heart is pure, but he has an old wound." "What kind?" I leaned forward. Sam paused, then spoke softer. "Years ago, Jake was engaged to Anna. Everything was ready for the wedding. Even the rings were bought. But suddenly, she refused without explanation. Then she quickly married Yaroslav Douglas, a jealous and harsh man. Since then, Jake has seemed to lose a part of himself. A feeling pierced me. This story wasn't about a crime, but about a ruined fate. Do you think Yaroslav could have pushed Anna to file the complaint? I asked. Sam clenched his fists. I'm sure of it. He's always been jealous and hated Jake. Returning to the precinct, I couldn't shake the image. Jake and Anna once ready to unite their fates. The complaint looked like an echo of old pain. Not a crime. In the evening, I entered the cell again. Jake raised his head, and a spark flashed in his eyes. Well, did you find an answer? He asked. I found too many questions, I replied. Why are you silent? Why don't you defend yourself? He looked straight at me. Because I don't need an excuse. I only need one thing, for you to hear my request. I felt a fire ignite inside. I was an officer accustomed to cold reason, but next. To him, my laws were crumbling. At night, I sat with my grandma in the kitchen. Vera silently poured tea. Her wrinkled hands trembled. Tell me, Grandma, I whispered, what do you do if duty and heart go different ways? She looked out the window where the lights were fading. The heart always chooses the difficult path. But those who only follow the law can lose themselves. I didn't answer. A storm was brewing in my chest. Ahead of me lay the truth about Jake Mosley, and, perhaps, a test that would change everything. The day of the court hearing came too quickly. I entered the hall where the high ceilings echoed every movement. Heavy walls, the smell of old wood, and the whispers of the public constricted the space. Jake Mosley sat in the dock. His face remained calm, but his eyes burned as if a whole life was contained within them. Anna sat opposite him in a black scarf, her eyes downcast. Next to her was her husband, Yaroslav, a man with rough features and a look full of animosity. His clenched fists spoke of rage. The judge, reading out the dry lines of the indictment, turned to Jake. Defendant, what do you have to say in your defense? Jake stood up. His voice was even. I wished no one harm. I didn't want to ruin anyone's honor with a word or deed. All I had was the past, and it shouldn't turn into shackles. A murmur rose in the hall. I felt my heart beat too fast. The prosecutor pounced on him, the defendant's words. Empty excuses. The complaint is clear. No witnesses are needed. His guilt is obvious. I couldn't stand it. I stood up, feeling everyone's gaze turn to me. Your Honor, I request the floor. My voice trembled, but I continued. The case contains serious gaps, no witnesses, no evidence. There are only words, and they may be dictated by someone else's fear or pressure. The judge squinted. Do you have confirmation? I took out the transcript of Sam Harrington's interrogation. It has been established that Anna and Jake were engaged. The wedding was called off suddenly, shortly after the interference of her current husband, Yaroslav Douglas. This man is known in the area as a jealous and quick-tempered person. I have reason to believe that the complaint was the result of pressure. Anna flinched. Yaroslav looked sharply at her. The judge noticed this and frowned. The hearing is adjourned. The prosecution is obliged to provide additional evidence. Jake was led back to his cell, but before the doors closed, he managed to give me a quick glance, and in that glance I read gratitude. In the evening, I went to see Anna again. The door opened slowly. She looked exhausted. Why did you come? She whispered. Tell the truth, Anna. No one can live in fear forever. You know that Jake is innocent. Her lips trembled, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Yaroslav made me do it. He said if I didn't write the complaint, he would ruin my life. Said anything bad about me. Those words were the key. I recorded her confession, realizing, tomorrow this will change everything. I spent the night without sleep. Grandma Vera sat quietly beside me, stroking my hand. You've become attached to him, Sarah, she said softly. It's obvious. But remember, if you save him not only for the sake of the law, but for the sake of your heart, it will be your choice. I was silent. Duty and feeling fought within me. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Yaroslav sat, clenching his teeth. His eyes flashed lightning. Anna lowered her head. But when the judge called her, she stood up and said, "My husband forced me. Jake is innocent." Silence hung in the hall. Yaroslav jumped up, shouting, but the bailiffs pinned him down. The judge, after a short deliberation, said, "In light of new circumstances, the charges are dropped. The defendant is released." I closed my eyes and, for the first time in a long time, took a deep breath. Jake was led out of the building. Outside, he stopped in front of me. "Out the wind." Ruffled his hair. Slight smile appeared on his lips. "You did the impossible, Sarah," he said. "I knew you were the one who could—" "I just did my job," I replied, but my voice cracked. "No, you gave me life and hope." We stood in silence in the noise of the city, where people rushed about there. Business unaware that a thread was born between us at that moment that would change everything. But that same evening, I received a note. "Don't leave him alone. Danger is near." I crumpled the paper in my fist. The story was just beginning. After the trial, I hoped everything would end, but in my soul, I knew too much was still hidden. Jake was free, but not completely. He was left under surveillance, and the shadow of danger hadn't disappeared. The threatening note didn't give me peace. In the office, I sat over papers, but my thoughts were drawn to him. Marina Olson noticed it right away. "Sarah," she said, leaning against the door, "you've changed. This Mosley is affecting you more than you think." I just silently closed the folder. She was right. In the evening, we met with Jake in a small meeting room. He looked tired, but his eyes shone. "Well, I'm breathing freely again," he said, smiling. "And it's all thanks to you." I looked at him sternly. "It's not me, but the truth. But know that someone still wants you dead." He nodded. "I'm used to it. Envy has always followed me like a shadow, but now it's different. Now I have you." Those words pierced me. I tried to maintain my coldness, but my heart traitorously trembled. The next day, I went to the old neighborhood where Jake's fabric store was located. The store was closed, the windows covered in dust, but inside, the smell of velvet and silk still lingered. I ran my hand over the rolls of fabric, as if touching his past, when I suddenly heard a voice behind me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sam Harrington came out of the shadows. "Once the best customers came here, but now there's only dust." "Tell me, Sam," I turned around, "who benefits from ruining Jake's life?" He frowned. "You think it's all just about Yaroslav?" "No, there are other relatives, envious people, especially his cousin. He was afraid that Jake would surpass him in business." Those words added another knot to the tangle. In the evening at Grandma Vieira's, I told her about the threads I had found. She listened, adjusting her glasses. "Sarah," she said quietly, "sometimes people hate not because they were harmed, but because they don't know how to love." I understood her, but the anxiety in my chest grew with each passing minute. Someone clearly wasn't going to stop. A few days later, something new happened. At the precinct, I received an unsigned letter. "Your Mosley hasn't paid yet. If you don't leave, you'll lose him forever." Marina grabbed the paper and ran her eyes over it. "Is this serious?" "You're in danger, Sarah." "I'm used to danger," I replied. But inside, the cold spread more strongly. To find the sender, I turned to the technical department. The specialists traced the signal. The letters came from an internet cafe on the outskirts of Chicago. Marina and I went there. The owner, a full man in a sweater, nervously adjusted his glasses. "Yes," he said. "A guy came in a couple of times. Sent letters, tall, in dark glasses. I heard him talking on the phone once. The name, I think, was Anna." I frowned. Anna again, but she confessed in court. So the threads stretched further. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time. "Vera made me chamomile tea. You're plunging deeper and deeper, granddaughter," she said. "But sometimes to get pearls, you have to dive even into the darkest water." Listened to her and realized there was no choice. Soon, I met with Jake again. We went out together into a small courtyard under the supervision of the convoy. The cold air cut my breath. "I was told," I began, "that your brother is involved." "Do you know anything about this?" He frowned. "Brother, yes, he's always been envious. But to threaten—" Jake shook his head. "I don't want to believe it." I saw his confusion, but knew the threads led there. A few days later, we detained Jake's cousin, Bender Mosley. A young man, thin with a nervous gaze, denied everything. But under pressure, he confessed. The letters were his. I wanted him to disappear, he said. He was considered the best all his life. I'm tired of being in the shadows. These words, the truth came out. The court lifted surveillance from Jake. He was finally free. When we met at the exit of the precinct, he was standing in a gray coat, holding only a small bundle of belongings. What now? I asked. He looked straight into my eyes now. Live, but not alone. I didn't answer. Everything trembled in my chest. Weeks passed. We began to meet secretly under the old lindens in the park, in small cafes where no one knew us. His hand reached for mine, and I allowed it. Each time seemed to stop, but rumors still leaked out. At the precinct, they whispered, "Detective Jenkins is too close to a former defendant." The words cut like a knife. Grandma Vera once said, "Love and the law rarely go together, but you must choose what is more important to you." Jake, meanwhile, began a new life. He opened a workshop for restoring old things. The strong hands carefully touched worn objects, restoring their beauty. I looked at him and thought, he's bringing not only things back to life, he brought life back to me. But the threat didn't disappear completely. One day a stone was thrown into his workshop with a note, "Your love is a mistake, beware." I clenched my fists. This meant only one thing. The fight wasn't over. Our secret meetings didn't last long. The rumors became louder, and it was no longer possible to hide. The precinct, they looked at me with distrust. Relatives also began to ask questions. One evening, I came home, and Grandma Vera greeted me with a serious look. "Sarah," she said, "I see how he looks at you. It's not just gratitude, it's love. But are you ready to go against opinions, against the law for him?" I was silent. Duty and heart fought in my chest. Jake invited me to his workshop. It smelled of wood, old varnish, and new beginnings. He showed me a restored mirror in a carved frame. "You see," he said, "it was broken, but now it's whole again. So am I. You helped me put myself back together." I looked into the reflection. We stood side by side, and in my eyes, for the first time, there was something I was afraid to admit. "Sarah," he continued, "I don't want to hide anymore. I want to walk next to you. Let the world say what it wants." I felt the walls I had built for years collapsing. I was a law enforcement officer, always standing on the side of the rules. But next to him, the rules ceased to be important. The conversation with my parents was difficult. My father frowned. "You're a detective, and he's a former defendant. People won't understand," my mother quietly added. "A difficult road awaits you, but if your heart is with him, we have no right to interfere." Only Grandma Vera smiled. "Love is also a law, granddaughter, the law of the heart." Jake and I decided to get married without pomp, without loud words, only close relatives and a few friends. In a small hall decorated with flowers, we stood side by side. He was in a simple dark suit, I was in a light dress. When the priest said the words of marriage, it seemed that the noise of the whole world disappeared. Only his hands remained, tightly holding mine. "Now you are my truth, Sarah," he whispered. I smiled through tears. "And you are my future." But even on this day, the shadow of the past didn't recede. Someone left a note at the doors of the hall. "Your love will not last. Watch your steps." I crumpled it in my palm and hid it. "Today I won't let fear steal our happiness." Months passed. We lived together, and every morning began with his smile and the smell of coffee he made for us. His workshop came to life. Customers returned, and I continued my service, but with a different feeling. The law remained my support, but next to him, I also learned to hear my heart. Sometimes passers-by whispered, sometimes colleagues squinted, but all of this became unimportant. The main thing was his eyes, in which I found peace. One evening, we sat on a bench by the embankment. The Chicago River sparkled with lights reflecting the sky. Jake took my hand. "You know, I thought life was over the day I was locked in a cell. But it turned out it was just beginning. I leaned against his shoulder, and I thought my heart was forever chained in uniform and rank, but it turned out to be stronger than the law. We were silent, listening to the sound of the water. The wind brought the scent of freedom. This story taught me the most important thing. The truth isn't always written in protocols. Sometimes it lives in the eyes of the person we're willing to protect, not for the sake of the letter of the law, but for the sake of their soul. I'm Sarah Jenkins, and I chose my heart.